once you start realizing that you as a person, you're much bigger than what you've been living with, and you're living as like a very narrow version of yourself, and in your shadow lies a lot of things that are causing you to hold yourself back. And what shadow work is, it removes that tension by accepting the fact that I can have two opposing ideas of who I am in my mind at the same time. It's about going into all these parts of ourselves that are uncomfortable, accepting that they exist, but without saying, I will now become that. Shadow work requires training of a couple of muscles. And one of the things you mentioned was self awareness. And self awareness is essentially a muscle that can be trained up. You get better at seeing who you are.
And I never stopped to think that my anger is actually coming from something within me. So when I started understanding triggers, it made hell of a difference in a way I make sense in the world.
Hello everyone, I am Obro and this is Stories and Stanza. Let's dive into what makes us human through intimate conversations about creativity, failure, and resilience. Let's begin.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Stories and Stanza. And today I'm joined by my guest, Oliver Mann, who is a journaling coach from Barcelona. And we did one episode previously, and he's back for a more detailed overview of shadow journaling. Hi, Oliver. Welcome to Stories and Stanza.
Thank you, and thanks for bringing me back. It's always a good sign.
When I recorded the first episode with you, I was inspired by your social media posts and your ideas. And I told many people about what you do, how you approach it. And I have shared this episode with many of my friends. And I've got a very positive response from the first one. And to our listeners, I would like to say that if you haven't, please go back and watch that episode. So we will be linking that in our episode description. So do not miss the first one where we talk about what is shadow journaling and how Oliver started his work. For today's episode, what I have in mind is that we go a little bit more practical. We look at some more examples, we look at some more prompts, and we be curious, we be authentic, and we try to find out the power of shadow journaling. Since we recorded our first episode, a few of my guests who have joined me on Stories and Stands said that journaling is such a powerful tool. The way you explained, Oliver, that all of us are keeping shadows and then it is possible to reveal those shadows and to rewrite our story through journaling. So before we get into some examples, do you want to give a little bit of a recap of what we talked about in our first discussion?
Yes, let's see if I can do a quick summary
Yep.
of such a big topic. Let me go back to just to the basics around it. And I think the key is that a lot of people, when they think about shadow work and shadow journaling, is that it's a very heavy and dark topic. And I think for me, the reality is that doing this kind of work is some of the most positive and uplifting thing that you can do, in the sense that once you start realizing that you as a person, you are much bigger than what you've been living with, and you're living as like a very narrow version of yourself, and in your shadow lies a lot of things that are causing you to hold yourself back. And the reason why I'm saying it like this is because it's just a way to look at how your shadow works. Essentially, everything is kind of, to some ways, polarized. And what we do when we're living is we're lifting one part of ourselves up, and then the balance of it we're pushing down. And what that means is that we're living life with a lot of tension. And what shadow work is, it removes that tension by accepting the fact that I can have two opposing ideas of who I am in my mind at the same time. And I want to live this one, I don't want to live this one. So we keep it in this tension. There's a lot of energy that disappears in this kind of keeping that out of balance. But once we can accept that we contain both, it's very important to realize that we don't have to live both. It's possible to say that I'm a generous person and I'm not greedy, and I hate the greed and I love the generosity. But we can also accept that sometimes I am greedy. Sometimes there are moments when I want the last cookie. Sometimes there are moments when I feel like I deserve all that money. And that moment makes me feel embarrassed because I am a generous person, not greedy. But once you can accept that I have both inside, but I don't have to live like a greedy person, I can live like a generous person. But that acceptance that I have both means that you no longer have to keep this intention, and you can have a release of energy and a moment where you go, okay, so there is a greedy part of me, but I don't have to live with that greed. I can accept that it is there. And this is what shadow work and shadow journaling is about. It's about going into all these parts of ourselves that are uncomfortable, accepting that they exist, but without saying, I will now become that. And the extreme version of this is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which is the perfect novel to explain how the untreated, unexamined shadow is, because it takes over. Dr. Hyde, so Dr. Jekyll is trying to be the good person, and then Mr. Hyde comes out because it's not being accepted, not being seen, and that tension is there. And then what happens? The tension is so high that it just flips, and suddenly it lives. The shadow starts living, and not the light, because it's not in balance. And this, I think, is the essence of what we're trying to do here.
That's beautiful. I'd like to say out loud to anyone who's listening that after we met and we did our first episode, I have become very curious about my own journey and what I can get out of this. It has made some beautiful differences in a way I process emotions. I intend to bring that up into this discussion as some of the outcomes of journaling, something that I was curious about, and it led me to discover things. We are also publishing the episodes as a blog, so there are all the takeaways for anyone listening. So you listen to the episode, and then there will be pointers for you to refer back to so that you get most out of journaling. So to get started, let's pick a prompt and then see how we can discover ourselves through it. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'd like to just say something about
Of
the
course.
whole process in general, because I work with a lot of people who want prompts. And I think prompts are powerful starting points. But I also want to make it very clear that this work doesn't need prompts. Shadow work requires training of a couple of muscles. And one of the things you mentioned was self awareness. And self awareness is essentially a muscle that can be trained up. You get better at seeing who you are. And you mentioned curiosity. This is like the big thing, like being curious about who you are and having a mindset of inner exploration is what will take you beyond the prompts. The prompts can be a good starting point, but the real work lies in examining how you react in certain situations. Why do certain things trigger you? Why do certain things make you happy? What's underneath all of that? And the reason why I'm pushing this idea around curiosity, honesty, and kindness is because those three processes are absolutely key in order to do this in a way that's healthy. So I can jump into one of the prompts if you want. I can use that as an example. I'll go into the one that we talked about triggering, because I think it's quite a fun one to do because it's so obvious, but you all have this. So when I do prompts, I do my prompts in 3 stages, because I think it's important to when we're working with the unconscious, a lot of the time we're picking up things that we're not completely aware of, and it can be quite surprising, and it can be very revealing. And sometimes when we reveal something about ourselves, it can cause incongruence when it comes down to our sense of identity. And that when the sense of identity gets a bit shaken, it can be quite an uncomfortable period of growth. But still, I think there's a lot of the value lies in having respect and understanding for what's happening in this. So I run this process where I'm talking about reveal, reclaim, and rewrite. And the idea behind this is we want to grow, but we also, like, that growth comes through a proactive move towards growth. I think a lot of the shadow work that I've seen out there is very much like, look, here's talk about some bad stuff and then just deal with it on your own. There's no sense of like, what's the circular, how do we contain it and move it forwards? So here's one of the prompts. Actually, this is taken from my upcoming shadow journaling deck. So the first part, like, what do you get most triggered by in others? What do you feel in others that makes you angry, frustrated, sad, whatever it is? And using that as a prompt is essentially a starting point for self-reflection, is a starting point for self-awareness. Because a lot of the time, we don't even realize that we're being triggered. We just suddenly were there in a moment of anger. And what's interesting about triggers anyway is that they cause you to live in a different time than now. They're time machines. So something that's happening now that triggers you, it's not actually the current situation that's causing the problem. It's the memory of a past situation that's now being layered on top of this. So it's quite a big jump that's happening mentally in this moment. So this process of examining what is it that triggers me? Is it because people are slow in the queue in the shop? Is it because somebody starts filling up their petrol tank and then they piss off, going to the toilet, and here I am waiting? Stuff that's just kind of these little things that trigger me. And then I'm using the reveal process. What is it that's going on? With curiosity. What is it that's actually happening here? Because if I'm really honest with myself, the fact that somebody in front of me decides to count pennies to pay their bills, pay the in the supermarket, and suddenly they're like some grandma with the little pennies and paying everything in accurate, exact money, and I'm getting frustrated. What is that about? Because surely this grandma is not causing me personal harm and frustration. And if I was supposed to be somewhere 10 minutes ago, that's my fault for not leaving half an hour earlier. So this anger that's happening here is inside me. And I have to own that. And then the next stage of this would be, where does this show up in my own life? Subtly, even. So in this case, first of all, the curiosity. What is it that is causing that frustration inside me? Just using this example, silly example of an old lady in the queue. So here it might be, so where does this show up in my own life? Maybe I'm slow sometimes and I hate it. Maybe I'm the one who goes out of the house last when everybody's trying to get their shit together, and I'm the last one to tie my shoelaces and go out. Or maybe I'm incredibly embarrassed by being late because I'm going to feel like I'm being judged. I'm going to be judged by being late at an event. So I'm always going to be the first person out of the house. And if somebody's slow in front of me, they are causing me to be judged in the future because whatever, right? And just there's no right or wrong answer in this. This is where the curiosity comes in and go, okay, what is it that's actually going on here? Am I frustrated that I'm going to be late because that's going to make me feel bad in one way or another? Is it just sheer frustration that people have no respect for my time? So I'm going like, well, I'm being disrespected now. Why does disrespect bother me? Right? And this is where we keep asking all these questions. And what's interesting here is the curiosity drives it, but the honesty is what really starts revealing things. Because let's say that this slowness feels like a personal disrespect to me. And then I have to be honest about that. It's like, okay, I don't like being disrespected. Okay, that's fine. But what does that mean? So again, the curiosity kicks in. Don't accept your first answers. Keep going. So then I'm not feeling I'm feeling disrespected. What does that mean? Well, that might mean that actually I've got low self-esteem. I feel shit about myself Because if I feel great about myself, you can't disrespect me. I don't care about your opinion. Your opinion is fine. You can have your opinion. If I've got a strong, healthy sense of self-esteem, nobody can disrespect me. I'd be like, well, you got your opinion. That's fine. I know who I am. So then it's like, okay, shit. I'm suddenly realizing I'm feeling disrespected because I feel shit about myself. And then you might have a realization, oh my God, that means I've been doing so much of my behavior comes from a place of poor self-esteem, which means I might have been behaving like a bit of a dick. And then we have to have the kindness that comes in and go, yeah, because that reveal moment, that kind of realization that I have been behaving badly because of poor self-esteem can easily become another stick to beat ourselves up with, which makes our self-esteem even worse. They're like, oh, you're such an idiot. How could you make that happen? All these people are going to hate you now because you've been behaving like this. And instead, we pull the kindness in and go, okay, this is something that has happened. And now we're aware of it. And we're starting a new part of our lives, multiple personality lives. And then we can move forwards and grow. But we can only grow because we take that point of observation. Right? So then we go into that final part of this 3-stage prompt. How could you approach this trait with more empathy for yourself and others? So then I can look at the empathy for myself and go, right, so this has been bad behavior up until now, but now that I'm aware of it, I can start behaving differently. I can see that when I'm in this position and I feel like somebody's disrespecting me, I realize that's because I haven't worked enough on myself and I'm taking it as an attack, but it's not actually an attack. They're just doing their thing. I'm just feeling sensitive. So I've suddenly got empathy for myself. I got empathy for them. And the whole situation can be toned down. And this is how that 3-stage process works in this case. First, we're looking at what triggers me, what inside me might be causing that trigger, and how can I have empathy for myself and for others when these things happen again. And this is then all driven through that 3-stage process, and also bearing in mind kindness is so important in this.
Very beautifully said. When I look back, the triggers, it was one of the most important light bulb moments for me as well. Because I used to be very angry. I used to be very angry, frustrated, triggered for as long as I can remember. And I was told from my childhood and adolescence that the anger is part of my physiology, my body, and certain things. And I never stopped to think that my anger is actually coming from something within me. So when I started understanding triggers, it made hell of a difference in a way I make sense in the world. And I have talked about this from time to time in my podcast, and I have become guests to others as well, where I talked about this as vulnerability, that this is something I learned the hard way, but I did learn. And then I feel now, and this is something I'll just go back to what you said to me in our first episode, that healing is like going to the gym. It's not like going to the doctor. It's not like you journal one day and you heal and then you never look back at it. It's something you need to keep at it. It's like you need to build that into your habit, whether you're working out or you're walking or any kind of healthy habits that you build into. You build healing into that habit, and then you truly start getting the outputs from that exercise. You start getting, it's not like you went to the doctor, you got some medication and that's it, but instead it's an ongoing process. And what I found interestingly is that sometimes the triggers are layered. So I have identified a trigger, but and then I think, oh, okay, this is it. But if I keep exploring, keep journaling, keep building these connections, that I was angry on this, then I was angry on another aspect, but these two are not related, but there's some connection out there. And then I think it's like an onion. The more layers you peel, and then the more layers you probably would discover and then find a way to get a better version of yourself.
I think the onion metaphor is great here, and I think it's very important for people who are just starting with shadow journaling, is to remember that the onion aspect of it is also the way that you protect yourself. Because essentially, you can't start writing and journaling about the most deepest, darkest things in the beginning. Not because you shouldn't or somebody tells you that you can't. Just generally, people don't have enough awareness in order to pick out those layers in the beginning. It takes time to get to the point of understanding that, like, for example, we talked about like the triggers. The first version of that might be, I hate old people in the supermarket in front of me because they're so slow, and I hate relaxing in my life. I just want to keep going. That might be the surface level that you accept that as an answer, right? But then later on, you might realize, right, okay, so me being angry because I'm being held up in a queue doesn't make much sense. There must be something more here. And then you can go beyond that. That won't happen for most people in the first time they do it, right? So then they might do that, and then they might get triggered again by the same thing, and they realize, actually, there's something else going on here. But another part, you talk about this in the sense of being circular. What I find really fascinating is that once you start growing and you start changing, and what's interesting about this kind of work is once you build self-awareness, it's hard to get rid of it. It's once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And that self-awareness impacts so much, because if you get self-awareness in one area of your life, it's impossible to suddenly be completely unaware in a different part. It just changes somehow the way that your brain works. Now, what happens with that is it changes your behavior in subtle ways. It means that when you're talking to somebody, let's say that somebody in your family triggers you. Like, family is a great example. Everybody's got some family member that triggers them. And when you start changing your behavior, because you realize that actually this person is triggering me because whatever, right? I hate the fact that my uncle is always like this. He's always behaving like this when he's drunk. Okay, fine. Now, when next time in that situation, I'm more aware of that. So I don't get into that same situation as I used to. What happens then is that this uncle is suddenly out of his natural behavior. This is how we've always done things. We always have this confrontation, and suddenly you're not confronting with me anymore. And I'm like, so this person is suddenly going, okay, I need to find a different way to create this connection, this tension. And then suddenly you're not being triggered this way because you've dealt with that. But this uncle that is somehow triggering you is now figuring out this isn't working anymore. I'm going to go this way. And suddenly you've got a new trigger that you haven't dealt with because your uncle is in a different position because you're suddenly behaving differently. Everybody out there is a mirror for you and your behavior, and you and your triggers, and you and your projections. Humans don't exist in isolation. We define ourselves through reflection of who other people are. So when I'm changing my behavior, you will reflect back differently because I'm giving you a different version of me. And that means that as much as I've understood the way that we triggered before, because I'm changing, the trigger is changing. The mirror, the light that comes back at me is a different version. So I have to accept the fact that I might get triggered by the same people, even though I've figured it out, the last version, right? This is like this story that people talk about so much around, like when you start growing and you start changing, people around you want to hold you back. They like pull you back down to the level that they know you as. This is where we are. You'll start growing, we're going to pull you back. In many ways, this is what's happening. People are seeing you in a different light, and then you have to deal with the fact that they're going to treat you like a different person. So there's going to be different triggers out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we are talking about self-awareness, and It is such a beautiful thing. I have my own theory around that. Is when your self-awareness is not built, or you're not self-aware, you are living in a sort of a bubble of ego. And when your self-awareness starts building, that horizon sort of keeps expanding, and suddenly you are not hurt, you are not triggered, and it's a self-sustaining way of your worldview, let's say. And I think if we are mindful about it, it's not only healing us in the present, it can resolve things in the past as well. That I was writing something on Mother's Day because I saw a lot of negative posts around people saying that I have a shitty relationship with my mother and things like that. And I wrote something down in my journal, and then I thought that maybe I should just show it to some of my friends as to what I was writing. And then a lot of people said that they wanted to hear it. Okay. And on account of Mother's Day, it's like I had a difficult relationship with my mother. I still have, like, and I have argued with her from time to time, and I felt that I was not accepted and things like that. But when I started becoming self aware, I felt that the point that you are making, that in one stage, two people are conflicting and you change your behavior, then they find another way to trigger you. But then you are also thinking the said person has something incomplete with them. You can work on your self awareness, you cannot work on the self awareness of the world. So, what it taught me is the acceptance of the imperfect world. That you can grow your self awareness, you cannot change the whole world, but then suddenly you are at peace with an imperfect world around you. So that's my take around it as well. I just thought that I'll throw in my thoughts as well to make this.
I can't remember if we spoke about it in the last episode, but there's this word Sonder, which I love, which is such an amazing. It's by a guy called John Koenig, I think. He wrote a book, a dictionary of something. Now you have to put it in the show notes because it's an amazing word. But the word Sonder essentially means to have the awareness that everybody around you has the same complex inner life as you do. This realization, you talk about the imperfect world, but if we look at the fragmented and imperfect self and realize that we're holding our shit together, all of us, all the time, we manage to contain this mishmash of sub personalities who want different things in different scenarios. We've got the ego that's carefully constructing like a card of, like a house of cards, which is what it calls our personality, and it's trying to protect it from everything so it doesn't fall apart. And I'm struggling with the emotions around, like, I don't know, it's my girlfriend, there's kids and a dog and there's job, and all this kind of stuff is causing my brain to just be like in tension. And we walk around like this with this basic existential conflict. And then we look at other people, and all we see are their smiles, their calm faces. They're walking down the street and they're listening to a podcast or whatever. And we forget that every single person around us is dealing with their own shit. They might be walking down the street and smiling, but that smile might be pasted on because they're terrified they're going to start crying in public because their boyfriend just dumped them 30 minutes ago. Whatever. All these stories are real because people having these things. Like, somebody might have just got a phone call and saying their parents are in hospital. All this stuff is there in everybody around us. And once you build up that awareness of yourself, when you realize that I'm dealing with this, because a lot of the time people are just pushing it down, pretending that everything's okay, and not even realizing that they're dealing with all this stuff. Once you start building that awareness up, you can start realizing that oh my God, this is a fantastic game to play. Like walk around the street and look at somebody and imagine what they're going through. Just imagine that they might have just had some amazing news and they're going to go home and celebrate, or they just found out that their brother's broken a leg, or any random thing. Maybe they just realized that their car's got their window smashed and they're going, oh my God, I got to deal with the insurance, all this kind of stuff. And start looking at people in that way. It changes the way that you see humanity, especially when you pick the most triggering people that you can imagine. If you hate tattoos, imagine some huge guy with face tattoos and head tattoos and looking really angry. And just imagine that person has just received a phone call saying that his mother is on her deathbed and she doesn't have long to live. And see how that changes the sense of humanity with somebody that you might think is just an absolute moron and an asshole. And really see how this is our shared humanity. And I think this comes from a sense of self-awareness, of being able to recognize that I see myself beyond the masks, so I will see you beyond your masks.
It's like Avatar, I see you, that concept. In the movie, when they say I see you, it's not like I look at you, I see into you.
Yeah.
That I really love the way they put it in that movie. And I think triggers is such an interesting topic. It's probably an endless discussion. It's
Yeah.
just, and so many people ask me to talk about it. And this is, I don't know, this is an outcome of the podcast, is that people think that I have some kind of solution to resolve triggers in others. So I recently
There is a
went,
solution, though.
yeah, no,
I think there is a solution.
there is definitely a solution. I'm saying they think of me as the solution. So one of the examples I wanted to bring up is I was in a party and then a lady said, then I listened to your podcast and you have talked about fail with me, anger management and so forth. My husband is very angry and all the time. Can you help him? I said, I can tell him what worked for me. And then I met her husband and he was really angry and he was seeing me as some kind of threat and he
Yeah.
started insulting me. I said, look, if your house is dirty, you have to clean it. You cannot expect talking to me will automatically clean your house. So you have to admit it's not clean, it's dirty. Then you
Yep.
get to work on this and then you can see the outcomes. It's not something, it's like not like a magic potion. I had that magic potion and I tell you, and then it'll work for you. You have to put your own efforts out there to
Yeah.
see the results.
This work does not have shortcuts.
No.
There's no spiritual bypassing. There's no way to walk around and pretend. I think a lot of people are doing that. They're going, right, I did some shadow work and blah, blah, blah. And then they actually haven't made much of a change. The thing that's key here is if you are not feeling any sense of discomfort when you're doing shadow journaling, chances are you're just pretending that you're doing it. You're not going into the deep spots, because there is a profound discomfort in realizing that you've been living your life in a different way to what you thought. This realization that I have a part of me that I really hate that is there, and I have to accept that this is there. I might be an amazing, peace loving person, and I'm a vegan, and I'm super pushing that happy side, and I'm like, peace on earth and no violence and don't kill animals. But then there might be a part of me there that's just going like, I just really want to fucking murder somebody sometimes, right? That inner anger that pops up. And then having to come to terms with the fact that on this side, I am extremely peace loving and life loving. And on the other side, I just want to murder and destroy. And that's okay. But realizing this, if you've been pushing an identity which is so strong on this side, and you have to accept that this is inside that whole thing, that can be extremely uncomfortable. And if you don't have that realization, then chances are you're just still pushing it down here and you're pretending that you're doing it. Because if you're not feeling that there's a discomfort in this, my bet is you're not being honest. You might be curious and you might be kind, but you're not honest. Because I just do not believe that nobody has something there. Just because it's the way that we are as humans and growing up. I had a long conversation with this one guy, amazing, with such a fantastic talk about a lot of these things. He was incredibly self-aware. And I was just so surprised by his willingness to just accept, like, see that his ego was playing such a major role in all of these things, but it was just his awareness around it. And I was thinking, there must be something here. I was really curious, something that would kind of make him go like, okay, shit, there's something. And in the end, like almost towards the end of our conversation, we got to this point where he was just, we talked about achievement, and he had this extreme need for having recognized achievement. And it wasn't for him. It was just being recognized externally as having achieved something. That was what his major drive was. And what's interesting, he came out of that just having spoken it, just saying like, oh my God, that's like a weight off my shoulders, just being able to recognize that. But it can be so hidden in the sense that we are caught up in a culture where this is the right thing to do, that we forget that there's another part here, like what's right for me. So we get caught in these multiple levels of the shadow. We got our personal shadow, which is like all the shit that's been happening to us that causes us to build it up. Then we got like a family shadow that's nested. We're nested inside the family shadow with all the stories that are there of, we don't do this and we don't talk about that person, and this person went and ran off with this person, we can't mention that because it's horrible. All these little secrets that are there that causes us to shape our shadow. And then we have another bigger one, which is our cultural shadow or national shadow or religious shadow. All these things are in there that cause us to have all these elements of, this is the right thing to do. And then being able to kind of unpack all of that is that process. And like, we've had a few prompts that we wanted to run through, but I think one of the key things to bring into this is your resistance is the guide to all the work that you do. Like, prompts are great, but you don't need them. What you need to do is start noticing how your resistance turns up. And the funny thing about resistance is that it shows up as a lower quality choice to what you're doing right now. So if you're in the process of journaling and you're about to write about your relationship with your mother, and your brain just goes, you know what? Like, I'm sure I left the dishes out. I'm going to go and do some cleaning. Or, God, it would be nice with a glass of water now. Or, I'm sure I need to go and check something else. That's resistance showing up. Resistance doesn't turn up as like, God, this is terrible. We can't write about this. Let's do something else. It shows up as, oh God, I'm feeling tired. This is boring. This is pointless. Let's go and do something else. And being able to listen to that. And I think something I'm exploring a bit now is this sense of, how do you distinguish between resistance and, let's say, some form of inspiration, and you get excited about something? Because it's like this shiny object syndrome, right? Where you might be doing your journaling and suddenly your brain's going like, oh, let's go and do this. The key question is, if you do this other thing, is that going to elevate you or not? Is it going to pull you down, or is it going to elevate you? Right? So if you're journaling and you're just having a great exploration around your relationship with your mother, will going to clean the kitchen help your journey towards self-discovery? Probably not. it's a distraction, right? But maybe you might be super inspired and go, do you know what? Shit, I could write a short story about this, or I can write a poem about this. And then you might go, actually, that's a way for me to work on this particular process in a different way that can be helpful. And then you got an inspiration. But the question is this going to improve my current situation, or is it going to make it worse? Does that make sense?
Yes. No, it definitely does. It definitely does.
So then when you figure out that resistance,
Yes.
then you start going further, right? Then the question is, what am I not writing? This is like my go-to, daily journaling is essentially using curiosity. I'll write, how do I feel? What's going on? What's going on today? Okay. Feeling stressed. Why? I got so much to do. Really? Okay, shit. It's because I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay, fine. So you're not stressed, you're just confused, right? It's simple stuff, but that process is an ongoing sense of curiosity, building awareness, what's actually happening here, right? And then going into this sense of what am I avoiding? What am I not writing?
That is amazing. I think I did a very dedicated episode on this self-sabotaging thoughts, and this can go into a big discussion as to when you are doing something and you want to do something, part of your mind stops you from doing it. Then there are explorations that we can do to get to understand our resistance, internal resistance better. And then there are patterns to unlock. On that note, I'll move on to our next.
Yeah, go ahead.
We are, if we keep talking, we will just go on and on about this, but we had something in mind. So let's go into the next one. And that's about regret. And you said something very beautiful here about writing ourselves a letter. And recently, I did an episode here, and the guest came to talk about her book, which is Letters from You to You. So it's a series of letters which are, when you read it, it'll feel like your higher self has written to you. And it was such a beautiful book. And it touched me deeply. And I recorded the episode before I read the book. So if I have read the book now, and now I think if I go back to the same person and interview her again, it will be a big revelation for me. So over to you about the second prompt that we chose about regret.
So this is, again, using that three-phase process that we talked about: reveal, reclaim, and rewrite. So first thing about regret is to look at what is it. So this prompt is that what's one regret you have and why does it linger? And what we're doing here is just trying to bring up from the dark what is it that's there. And the lingering aspect is this sense of we're pushing it down. And then being able to bring it up into the light and look at it and go, okay, well, let's reveal what this regret is. And then the next process of observation is, like we talked about, the reclaiming, taking ownership, which in this case would be like, where might this show up? So how can you reframe this regret? So how can you reframe the regret as a learning opportunity? And the reason why I think this is interesting, and this goes back to what you were talking about earlier, in the sense that it can change so much of the past as well. And the reason why is because the past is not something we can really talk about from an objective perspective. We can talk about it from a set of interpretations, and we all have our own interpretations, but the event itself is so far back. There's no factual things we can say, this is exactly it. And it doesn't matter what is exactly it. What matters is what's our interpretation of it. And interpretations can be reinterpreted. This is what's so important. So in this case, we're looking at, well, how can we reframe this regret as a learning opportunity? What did that teach me? Maybe my regret is I didn't tell my stepfather that I loved him enough before he died. What does that teach me? It teaches me that I shouldn't be holding back my expression of love and care to people around me. It teaches me that I should live more in the moment and not expect that I'll have forever to do all the things that I want. Right. But on the one hand, that regret can make me feel like, oh my God, he died not knowing that I loved him. I feel so shit for not being a better stepson. Like all these stories can be going on in my head, and I'm blaming myself for all of this. But then I can reframe it and go, well, there's the learning here. I still know that he was an intelligent man and he knew that I loved him, even if I might not have said it close enough to his death, but he was also he might not have taken it in at that point. So my learning experience from this is don't wait. If you love someone, tell them, right? And then the rewriting part is, for example, like Robert A. Johnson talks a lot about the power of ritual in this process. And ritual in this context is, he says, the smaller the better. Doing huge rituals is not necessary, but small rituals can have much more of a poignant and important value for us. So in this case, maybe I'll light a candle and I will say, I love you to my stepfather, even though he's passed. And it's my process of kind of having done that and completed that part so I can move forwards. I might write an unsent letter to my stepfather and explain how I was so sad. I didn't know how to talk to him. It was a painful experience. And I loved him so much. It was difficult to even think about saying that. It was just, I was obsessed with my own situation and I'm sorry. Right? And that gives us an opportunity to reframe a lot of our past experiences. And every single that we experience can go through the same process. It's a lot of it is about revisiting things, but with the intention not of being stuck there. Because this process of regret or observing regret can easily be turn into this thing where I'm going like spiraling down into shit. I am such a bad person. I can't believe I didn't do that. He was suffering on his deathbed. He was in pain. And there I was not expressing myself well enough. I made his life worse. He was already in pain. I'm such a bad person. I always do this. And then suddenly I'm going all the way down and I'm realizing that, oh my God, I'm such an awful human being. Why does anybody love me? And this is why, for me, the process that I'm working with is so, so important because in everything that we do, when we look at ourselves, we can go into a spiraling process of self-blame. But the key is to look at what's the interpretation I can pull out of this where I have something that changes me. I can now readjust my behavior based on my learning. Because if I'm just looking backwards and I'm wallowing, chances are I'm going to spiral out. And that's what we want to stop. We want to go, okay, I have this regret. It taught me something extremely powerful. I can't change it, but I can change my future. And how do I do that? My next step is I'm going to accept that was not my best self. And I will never do that again. And now this is how I'm going to behave going forward.
This one, that the example that you talked about, it cuts very close to me because something very similar happened between me and my father. So it was towards the end of 2019. He passed away all of a sudden. And then I didn't speak with him for a couple of days before he passed away. And I didn't know if he was like that unwell. So I fought with him about something very silly. It was just immaterial in today's world. But when he was gone, there's no more opportunity to speak with him or tell him. And also had this unending sort of guilt and regret that I didn't speak with him. And I asked this to myself for a very long time that I was upset with him. Why didn't he call me? Or if he was not feeling well. So he was also upset with me in certain ways. We didn't get to finish our story. And which is why I held on to the grief for years and years. And then when I started gradually building and working on self-awareness, just going back to the previous point, I think in the triggers we talked about it, that someone can affect you in one ways and then you see that the dynamics has changed. And I feel now is that once I started kind of be more aware on emotions, it told me that I was not perfect and he was not perfect. And we are living in that imperfect world. We clashed on something that was our point of view back then. But there's no point trying to dissolve that. That is the reality, that he was upset with me and I was upset with him. But that was in the moment. That doesn't mean that he didn't do his duties as a father or I didn't do my duties as a son. So it's, if I use that to beat myself up, then I'll never move on. I never let the grief go. And so the incident I'm talking about was 2019. So it took me a good 5 years to understand this and to come to terms with my grief. And now I don't feel, I mean, I miss him, but I don't feel that guilt. As in, I feel that we were both kind of in a state. We were not emotionally intelligent. We were not self-aware. And we made ourselves a difficult moment. But there's no point beating myself up about it because that's not a lock I can unlock. It is better to accept that is the reality and that is what has happened. So,
And I think that's what you're saying there is so amazing. Like this sense that realizing that you're also both guilty in a way,
yeah,
which is also to take away that sense of this is my fault. I should have been better. But realize you both could have been better, but you weren't.
Yeah.
And also to not take that one moment as a defining moment of all the time that you had together. It's also very important. It's so easy to take the last moment of anything and plaster that over everything else. And then we color a whole relationship based on a single event and we forget that there's a huge depth of experience that comes there from all the other times. And this is just one moment.
Yes. Wonderful. Let's move on to the next prompt that we talked about. Is you gave a beautiful example of looking into the mirror and see how we see ourselves and how others see us. I wanted to overlay that in our journaling aspects is because I'm going back to what some of the things we discussed in our first episode, that we are a lot of times when we are journaling, we are doing it at a superficial level, right? That we are just writing down, we are documenting, but we are not getting anything out of it. Right? Maybe you also said today that we are being authentic, but we're being vulnerable, but we are not being honest with that. So there are these phases, and I think it makes more sense in today's world that there can be phases where you can be emotionally drained, you can be emotionally vacant and purposeless. And how do we sort of interpret that? And it's probably not one answer that would address this, but how do we address something like that? We are getting stuck in the same routine over and over again, or feeling that lack of purpose. And I know if we are curious, that the purpose thing, it can go into different levels there as well. How would you address this one?
Okay, so this is a very big one.
Yes.
But There's one thing that's come up for me quite a lot recently, and this is the way the ego works, in the sense that it's trying to protect us. It's trying to protect itself. Let's put it like this, right? So the ego is essentially being the puppet master, and it's trying to make sure that we're protected. The ego is protected, and what it's doing is building up layers and layers of masks to cover up all the flaws that it feels that we have. So the ego is basically kind of like, there's so much shit behind here. Nobody can find out. So I'm going to put on this mask. I'm going to put on this mask, and all these multiple personalities of who we are all basically, it's like sitting on a three-legged stool, right? You got a stool with three legs, but you're only trying to balance on two of them, right? This is what the ego is doing. All these masks, and if we're get into the wrong situation and the masks fall off, I'm going to crash down from this chair, and it's going to be an absolute mess. I'm going to be ashamed, and I'm going to be embarrassed and humiliated, because all of these masks are there to protect me from the fact that, like we talked about before, I'm an amazingly generous person, and I'm going to hide my greed. And if I don't have that mask on and people see that greed, they're not going to love me. They're going to see I'm a bullshit person. I'm supposed to be generous, but I also have this greed. So I'm going to push this down. That's the part of my mask. I'm holding that there, right? Or that I'm a vegetarian, I'm vegan, and I'm life-loving, but there's a part of me that also just wants to destroy and kill, right? So there's this kind of aspects in that. The ego's balancing on this chair and trying to make sure that nobody finds out that I have these other aspects, because if they do, they're going to stop loving me and everything is over. But the reality is that doing this work, and this third leg is the shadow. And once you start approaching that and you start realizing, okay, I have these paradoxes inside me, there are these triggers that are there that I'm starting to get aware of. I remember that regret, and I've accepted the fact that I can't do anything about this. I could have been better, but I'm going to be better in the future. Suddenly what happens is that third leg gets grounded, and you no longer waste all that energy trying to keep it balanced. And the irony here is the ego doesn't want that third leg to go down, because that is what reveals everything that's behind us. But once you get to that point of the third leg and you steady and you can sit down, the ego actually has an opportunity to show up with pure authenticity. Instead of going out there with, I need to put this mask on, I need to put this mask on, ego can go out there and go, do you know what? I am feeling fantastic. And if I'm not feeling fantastic, I'm able to tell you, because it won't cause this chair to fall over, because I feel safe now. And that's the big part of what we're doing with this work. We're trying to get ourselves to be aware of who we are, all of us, so that we have a much more stable grounding, so that when other things come up, and there are always going to be things that come up, we don't suddenly go like, oh my God, this is going to reveal the true me and everybody's going to hate me. We go, this is okay. This is a storm, but I can handle it because I don't have to wear these masks. So nothing's going to blow away and reveal something else. I'm fine. I can relax in these social situations. I can relax when it comes down to these triggers with family members. And I can say, it's okay, because it doesn't mean I'm unlovable. It just means that I made a mistake, right? So going into this prompt, again, trying to see if we can pull this back in here. So this prompt is just about self-reflection. So imagine that you're looking into a mirror and describing what you see as if it was someone else. And what I love about journaling is that you can't fake it. If you are writing, you are journaling. So I might have said this in the last call, I can't remember now, but I remember having a guy in a workshop, and he was trying to fake it, and he was writing about some random thing in the future that obviously couldn't happen, about celebrating his birthday on Mars in 150 years. And what was interesting is he was obviously trying to use humor as a way to distance himself from the actual work. But what happened was, what he wrote was actually what he really wanted to write. And he realized that he was celebrating this birthday in 150 years with a close group of friends. And he realized, I don't have a close group of friends because I behave like a dick. So I need to stop behaving like a dick, and then I'll have close friends, and and then I can have what I want. So in this case, what we're doing is we're pushing ourselves to write about ourselves from a separate, like as if it was someone else. But what happens in that process is we reveal who we are because you can't avoid it. It's your projections are coming out. And that's quite a fascinating experience because we can start seeing ourselves perhaps in a kinder light and see, I can see this is a person who is tired from dealing with life stress. It's somebody who's dealing with the kids all the time and managing to keep their shit together. And actually, I'm really proud of that person for holding it all together despite all the things that are happening in life. So the next part of this prompt is, what do you feel as you look at yourself, and where do those feelings come from? So that could be that part, right, where you go, okay, well, this person looks like they're really kind and self-sacrificing. Where does that come from? Is it because they're giving up on their own desires? Is this person giving all their time to their family and not having any time to live their own life? Or is this person spending so much time at work trying to make life better, but then realizing that life is passing by because they're not spending time with their family? And then you have an opportunity to look at it at that, like, go these deeper levels. Again, you won't get there unless you're honest, because it's a brutally honest thing to say, this person in the mirror is working too much and missing their kids' upbringing, or this person is giving so much of themselves that they run out of battery and they're going to crash soon, or this person is living so much in the past that they've forgotten what it's like to be able to create their own future. This is deep honesty and requires a willingness to sacrifice the safety of, this is my identity at the moment. Because all of this is identity shaking. I work a lot because I want to provide for my family. That's the identity. The negative side of that is, I'm a shit father or a shit mother because I'm not there all the time. These things are there at the same time. I'm a generous, amazing parent, and I give all my time to my kids and my family. I'm running out of energy and I don't know how to live my own life, and I feel like I've sacrificed myself, right? Or I live so much in the past, I can't get over the trauma, I can't get over the perceived victimhood that I have, that it's impossible for me to look to the future and see that there's a brighter day ahead of me. I have to, in order to be able to take that step forwards, I have to be willing to say, my identity as a victim, my identity as a provider, my identity as a carer is not solid enough for me to rely on that as a single point. And then coming back to the rewrite, what's one kind thing you can say to your reflection today? What's something that you can do that'll take you out of this spiral? So I worked so hard in order to make this work, but it's okay for me to stop now and say, I'm going to spend some time with my family. It's okay to change the balance of what I'm sacrificing. Maybe my family won't be angry at me if I say, look, I'm not going to do any housework this next 3 days. I'm going to go to the spa. I'm going to chill because I really need it. And also to start that process of, like, maybe all these stories of my past are not 100% true. Maybe it's okay for me to start looking to the future and rewriting my story. And all of this is the essence of what we do in shadow journaling. It's about that whole process of exploring and becoming aware and honest with ourselves and being really kind, because it's hard work. And it's hard work even when it's positive stuff. So Robert Johnson was saying it's so much easier to get people to talk about how bad they are than how good they are. But if you were to talk about how, like, people's willingness to say, you know what, I'm really good at something, and super proud of something that they've done, and get them to get in that process, that's also an uncomfortable thing, even though the result is so much more clearly positive. So somebody who might be really exuberant and life of the party, but has been holding themselves back because somebody some point said children should be seen, not heard, and stop being so noisy and stop your play is so loud. And then they're holding that back. And actually they're super amazing, super funny, and their laughter is contagious and they make everybody happy around them. But they've been carefully holding that back. That means there's the discomfort is in accepting and realizing that my ego has stopped me from living my best life out of fear of being judged for being exuberant and noisy and fun. And that realization is I messed up my own life. I held myself back. I'm going to be 46, 47 in like a couple of weeks. By the time this podcast is out, I'm 47. And there have been so many times when I was looking at my age and going like, shit, my ego has absolutely held my life back so much. Like this point where this desperate desire to be seen, coupled with this absolute anxiety of being judged, meant that I was in complete turmoil. Don't be seen. Oh, no, be seen. Don't be seen. And realizing that now, it took me some time to go, do you know what? That's okay. We've been through that now. That's past. It's still moments of discomfort of going like, this is who I am. And I'm talking about shadow journaling as if this is something, I don't know, like I invented this and this is my thing. But the point is I'm coming at this with this deep sense of humility of having had amazing teachers behind me and reading Jung and reading Robert Johnson, Diane Ford, and all these amazing people that have supported these ideas. And then this side where I'm going, yes, but this is so powerful. You still need to explain it. You still need to put it out there. So you've got this constant sense of this inner battle and realizing that, yeah, so at 47, I just have to accept that this is the time that it's happening. This is the time that I could do this. And maybe I wouldn't be able to do it at 37. I definitely wouldn't be able to do it at 27.
This is, if you look at it with age as a number sort of thing, then you'll think, oh my God, I have lost so many years, valuable years towards ego. But then there is also another side of it. It's like, at least it's happening now. There are so many people who are stuck and they have no clue that life could be so much more beautiful. Right? So,
I completely agree with that. I agree with that. And I think sometimes things happen just because it makes sense at that moment as well. Right. So shadow work, unfortunately, in some ways, is becoming very popular at the moment. I'm saying unfortunately, not because I think it's not important, but I think I know there are so many people. Yeah, but people are scamming on it. There's so many really well executed ads that drive people in to spend their money on things that are just don't exist, like literally don't exist. People are paying money for products that do not arrive, and they being tricked in because shadow work has a promise underneath it, which is you will become lighter and better and everything's going to work out without having to go to therapy. And it's just, I feel like it's a privilege to be working in this field because the power of what we can do in a very short amount of time is absolutely amazing. But it's also quite scary because you see so many charlatans out there pushing it as if it's just write a little bit about your regrets. And I'm like, no, don't write about your regrets without also looking at where does it take you afterwards and how do you grow from it. This is the key. Like it's like throwing people into the forest and say, okay, go and examine shit, have a look around, but without telling them how to get out if they need to get out. Show people the way out of the forest. Show them how to get through. I can't remember who it was that said this, but it's such a beautiful expression around being in a depression. If you're in a dark place, don't stop. Keep walking. this is what we're trying to do here. Keep walking. Find a way through rather than being stuck in it.
Absolutely. And I look back in my professional career, which is technology and finance and telecom, that sort of thing. And
Yeah.
I see that people struggle with these interpersonal moments of acceptance so hard. I have struggled quite a bit. As in, let's say if I prepare for some event or some presentation, and then that just gets tossed around by people saying that it's not good, or that it doesn't get accepted, it gets questioned and things. And for the longest time, I used to think that has something to do with me. And I feel really bad the way my ideas are tossed around. And gradually, what I felt is that what people are saying, it has nothing to do with me. It's because they want to be heard in certain ways. They have that need of validation. Like I do, they do have the same needs. And once you understand that, I think you are in a position to set your course where you want to be. You will not be thrown off by anything that comes your way. Then you see that, oh, okay, this is basically, I need to hear this, but I still need to go where I want to go. And I am not going to go off track because something comes in my way. It's a some it's a skill I think is very important. We are talking about mental health and wellness and growth, but I think so many people would be helped by these ideas.
I think what you're also talking about there is foundational stuff around self-esteem.
Yes.
And I think this is one of the things I find really powerful around what we're doing. Self-esteem comes from this idea of not being good enough, right? But once you can start working on self-awareness and start building this sense of self from a deeper point of view, what happens is if you have low self-esteem, everything around you is going to feel like an attack because there's an insecurity, a fundamental insecurity of your own self-worth. That means that anything that comes at you is potentially an attack because I feel low value. And that causes reactive communication, and it causes essentially things to just easily turn into shit. But once you have a deeper sense of self-esteem, like you said, you understand that the other people are going through their own stuff. So that what they're saying isn't an attack on me. It's them in their own world dealing with their own unresolved issues. And my self-esteem is healthy enough to understand that's what's going on for them. I won't take that as a personal attack. And when they're criticizing something, I can choose, is that a valid criticism? Because I can look at it and go like, yeah, actually, you're right. At which point, because of my healthy self-esteem, I can go, you're right. That's a good point. I agree with that. And then you can look at another one and go, I don't agree with that. I don't think that's the right way of doing it. Right. But that all comes from a place of self-esteem and being comfortable in your own skin and realizing that a lot of other people are not. Like all toxic behavior comes from a lack of self-esteem.
I think we explored quite a lot in our discussion today. It is a very vast subject. It can go on and on about it. I just want to recap that we talked about, we gave a summary of shadow work. We talked about the approach. We talked about triggers. We talked about self-awareness. We talked about different masks. We talked about regret, many things. And just to wrap up today's episode, we also we plan to talk about joyful or playful and rewarding moments and to interpret them through journaling. I think that would be happy or not, like it should be a good closing note to this beautiful discussion. What do you think?
Yeah, okay, let's bring it back to the joy in the childhood, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So there's another prompt here that you can use. Basically, again, going back into to remind yourself what kind of activities were you doing as a child that made you feel playful and alive. And I think there's an innocence in that of going back to when you were a human without the worries of being an adult. What was it that made you feel alive? And I think this is the big part of this, is because we have all these sub personalities that kind of just layer on top of everything, and then start exploring, what do I do now? What do I do now that makes me feel like I'm in play, in flow, in just pure joy? And as adults, we have a tendency to just lose a lot of that childishness, like this childish expression of pure joy, and being able to tap into that. And I'm very bad at it. Like this is something that I need to work on a lot. Just going into something just for pure joy, just for fun. And then the final point here: what's one playful activity that you can do this week or today? And the reason again why we're taking this in this kind of like 3-stage part is because if you're curious and honest about all of this, it's very easy to use joy as a way to punish yourself again. Because you might just go, shit, I used to remember, I used to love all these things. It's so amazing. And now that I've got my own kids, I've kind of lost touch with all of that. And I'm treating my kids in a way like they're little adults rather than little children. And you can stop turning this into a negative spiral again and actually go, well, let's stop the spiral and go, well, this is what happened up until now. And from now on, what can I do? What's one playful activity? Maybe that playful activity is with your kids. Maybe it's on your own and going to some arcade, just stupid stuff. I think the importance here is what we're trying to do is give parts of ourselves, those multiple personalities, a chance to be seen. And that chance to be seen doesn't mean suddenly I have to live like a child, but it means maybe I will bake some cookies and eat them myself. Maybe it means going to a toy shop and having a look around and just remembering all this amazing stuff that I used to play with when I was a kid. And just having this moment of connecting with this child inside of you and go, do you know what? I'm sorry I've pushed this child down too much. I'm now going to let my inner child turn up a bit more and have fun. So all of this circles back to the same thing. It's just about self-awareness, about this realization that I carry all of this inside. That on the outside, I might be a serious doctor, or I might be a lawyer, or an engineer, or a fireman, or whatever it is. So I have to be this serious person. But then there's this childish version of me that's desperate to be seen and wants to have its moment in the limelight. And be willing to like, today I will walk on the high street and I will buy myself an ice cream alone and behave like a kid for a bit.
That's beautiful. And I think it's such an important sort of finale for the discussion. Let's say then we talked about a mixed bag of things, but it is as important to recognize our triggers as equally important to identify our rewards, our joys, our that's where our authenticity is lying.
Absolutely. I think the goal here is not just to explore the darkness, it's to explore all of us. That's the key. Integration and becoming healed, as in becoming whole, is all of it, the joy and the pain.
Yes. Amazing. I think we used up a lot longer than we initially planned to, but it is such an important discussion. I wanted to do a second episode for a very long time. Thank you once again for joining us. Everyone loved your work, your ideas on the first one. This is so much more detailed and introspective. I'm sure that it will resonate with many more audience. Thank you once again, Oliver.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure.